Someday, when I'm awfully low, when the world is cold, I will feel a glow just thinking of you and the way you look tonight. Oh, but you're lovely, with your smile so warm and your cheek so soft. There is nothing for me but to love you, just the way you look tonight. With each word your tenderness grows, tearing my fear apart. And that laugh that wrinkles your nose touches my foolish heart. Lovely, never, never change. Keep that breathless charm. Won't you please arrange it, for I love you just the way you look
I never joined a fan club in my life, to be honest. I was not really into clubs, and a lot of people in this group, I think, are not necessarily fan club types, but we sort of came together for a cause. And what had occurred was there was a screening of New Moon at a Jeanette MacDonald club meeting. And you wouldn't know it today because I think we've kind of made a big change in the MacDonald Eddy world. But back then, there was a lot of infighting as to, if you love Jeanette, you only love Jeanette or you only love Nelson, and the team fans, because there was a suspicion that, oh my God, what if the rumors were true that there was something between them, was completely frowned upon. It was lied about, it was denied, it was a mess. And so we were at a screening of the Jeanette fan club. The only reason I went was because Jeanette's sister Blossom had asked me to write a book and to dig deeper into the story, and she told me to go to this fan club. I went there, and for the next 6 years I would go to their luncheons every year. And actually, I met some of my best sources in that club, even though they were, outwardly, Nelson was a nobody. He's lucky Jeanette dragged him along on his, with him because he had no talent and he was nothing. And of course, the Nelson Eddy Club was saying, oh, she was nothing. She couldn't sing. She was blah, blah, blah. I mean, this went on endlessly. Some of you may not know this, but a few of you have been with us for many years and know what the climate was like. I was more on the quote Jeanette side because I knew Blossom, so I knew what she told me, and her friends were Jeanette's friends, so I would kind of hear the Jeanette side of the story. But at the first meeting I ever went to, I met a woman named Diane Goodrich, and she told me she had known Nelson, and so she knew a lot. She said, "What you're saying, Sharon, is true, but you can't really talk about it here." So anyway, we got together later and spoke about it and decided to do research together because there were Nelson people who would talk to her, didn't want anything to do with me because I was a Jeanette person, and vice versa, people that wouldn't talk to her. So trying to put all the drama aside and just get facts together, we had been working together for a couple of years, and there was a buzz about it. They knew something was in the works. I had put out a pictorial book about Jeanette when I was 19, where I sort of hinted that there was a relationship between Jeanette and Nelson. And that was shocking. Right away, I was an enemy. And not only that, I put her correct birth date, which was 1903, which was like horrifying. I mean, it was a different world. So bottom line, there had been a couple incidents at this Jeanette fan club, and one was when they screened This Is Your Life. And I just sat and cried during it because I knew Blossom old, and there she was young. Sorry. So it was difficult. Don't mean to be emotional. Anyway, at the end of it, the president of that club got up and made a big speech about how the reason that Jeanette cried when Jean Raymond came out was not because she was sorry she married Jean, but because his singing reminded her of all the happy years of marriage with Jean. I knew otherwise, and I sat there and I was just like, oh my God. And the people around me started to buzz, and it was the first time that I felt there was sympathy for what I was trying to tell, what Blossom had told me. Because she made such a spectacle out of it that they knew there was something more to see in This Is Your Life. Anyway, cut to about a year or so later, with 1977, they were showing New Moon, and after Stout-Hearted Man, the Nelson fans in the audience clapped too loudly. And Clara had John Martin, who was a good friend of mine, who was a projectionist. He's the man that got us the Fox films, Jeanette's Lost Fox films. We helped with that. They were considered lost. They were only nitrate prints. Anyway, he was a good guy, and he was responsible for getting that. And he was also one of my sources, even though he had to be in the closet about it. But anyway, she had him stop the film, and she stood up and she said, "Look, we tolerate you Nelson people, but we don't want to hear from you." And Diane Goodrich and these other people who knew the story got up and walked out of the room. And I sat there for a minute and I go, this is so wrong. And I got up and walked out of the room. So I don't know what happened at the rest of the movie, but later, Diane and I went to get a cup of coffee somewhere, and she said, this is it. She says, I don't like fan clubs. I don't like any of this game, but there has to be a place where people can like one or the other and not be ostracized, and there has to be respect shown for them. So that's why she founded this club. I didn't found it. I came on as the vice president. And she decided with the first issue, those of you who've seen the magazine compilations, she wrote a president's letter where she just said, look, there's got to be somewhere in the world where we can have a forum. And it became like a research group because people started coming forward and saying, you know what, I knew this. You know what, I knew Nelson, I knew Jeanette, I worked with them, I did this, I did that, and they started coming out of the woodwork. And so that's really what this was set up to do. I'd go to a club meeting. I'll never forget a club meeting in New York, and this woman came to me, she raised her hand, "Can I say something?" I go, "Yeah," because I was doing questions and answers, and she said that, she says, I went to see my psychic the other day, and I was telling her how upset I was about this whole Jeanette and Nelson thing and blah, 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 and it was really true. And the woman said, "Oh, yeah, of course it was true. Jeanette consulted with me." And I said, "Really? Can you give me her phone number?" So that's how I got an interview, and this happened over and over, city after city after city. I went to Kansas City. I met Peggy Seo, who was in the King and I with Jeanette. She was a sweet woman. She spoke, I think we may have shown the video here once of the interview, but I went on the radio and there were people calling in, oh yes, I remember when Jeanette was in The King and I, and we were kind of making fun of something, and Nelson was sitting right behind us, and we, and he wasn't happy about it. And then somebody else came on. Yes, Jeanette left right after the show, and suddenly, she couldn't hang around. She had to leave, and Nelson left. And then, someone else took me to the Mulebach Hotel. That's where they stayed. And then, the Italian garden restaurant is right down here, and we'll call the owner up, and he'll come in, and he goes, oh, yes, and they sat right there at that table. And it's like these things just kind of fell into my lap. Of course, over the years, there were a few, horrific letters and emails I received telling me what a vile person I was, but okay. I took it as a compliment that I must be getting awfully close to the truth. But anyway, Diane, she had known Nelson briefly, a couple of months, and she was going to talk about it. A few people knew about it, but she talked to, I remember that she had a pool party, and Kat Clark, who some of you know from Facebook, she was at some of them, but at this particular one, Val Davidson and Lucille Moretto, who you have read about if you've read Sweethearts, she was a person who really didn't believe anything, but that's why she was so valuable as a source, because she'd say, well, I saw this Jeanette Nelson here, but that doesn't mean anything, and if you tell me that Jeanette postponed her Christmas party this year, then I'll believe it. And of course Jeanette postponed her Christmas party that year, but and it's like all this research was going on at the time. Anyway, Diane was talking to them about her experiences, and she was talking about how she had gone to hear Nelson. She and her father went to hear Nelson at Carnegie Hall in the summer of '51. And Val and Lucille were like, we know everything about Nelson. We know everything he ever did, and he never sang at Carnegie Hall in 1951. Well, it turned out he did. He recorded a Bell telephone hour on August 20th. But when Diane had that experience, she just kind of shut up and went back in the closet. And we only just went through and told the story without her being part of it. And Nelson was told that she had died, and so that was how we left it. From his point of view, that's what he knew. Anyway, she was quiet about it, and 2 years into the club, there were things that were going on, and basically she felt that this club was not really bringing her much happiness, and she stepped down, basically, and I took over. So over the years, our club was started with controversy. It was started as a sort of a Team Jeanette Nelson Pride parade here. We just went out there and started this, and I've kept to that, all these years. Digging into research and updating and correcting and putting out there what we needed, what we found out over these years, and certain treasures have, somehow fallen into our lap and come back to where they really sort of belong. And so that's been very amazing. There's been times where I thought, well, I don't know how, I think we sort of know everything. And then the next rush of information would come up and we would be astounded, So we've always been kind of a gutsy group and a very vocal and inquisitive group. And I appreciate all the input of everybody over these years to keep the information coming. I mean, people will show up at meetings and say, hey, did you see this thing in the paper? Hey, I found this clipping somewhere. I found this and that. And, there was always this attitude that that the research was important. And I think maybe that's how we maybe differ than just a club that just sits around and oohs and ahs over Jeanette Nelson, although we do. And we try to keep receptive there for new people who discover them. And there's been so many new people, young people who come, now via social media, but are discovering them for the first time. And, you have to smile a bit and remember what it was like when you first discovered them. And here they are discovering them brand new. And so that's what makes Jeanette Nelson timeless. And I'm glad that we're here. Can't believe it's been 40 years, but it has. So I had hoped to have the next issue ready of the magazine. It's going to have this picture on the cover. It's the first time, I think, in quite a while that we've just done a photograph, but that seemed to be an appropriate one since you'll hear more about that today. But it's amazing that this is a story that keeps on giving in many ways. And so we're going to just continue forward because that's what we've always done. So let's see. I think the next thing I will do here is introduce our speaker. Some of you have seen her year after year at the meetings, and I've always meant to have her come up and speak. And this time she agreed to do so, and immediately after that, almost immediately after that, we found some more supporting material sort of fell into our lap that sort of pulled it together. So that's why the theme of this meeting will be that. So I want to introduce Sandy Ladarius. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm very happy and honored to be here. I started out as a Jeanette MacDonald Nelson Eddy fan the same way probably a lot of you have. My mom and I used to stay up for the Late Show and watch different films, and it was the minute that I saw Naughty Marietta that changed everything. I was immediately in love with Nelson and Jeanette, and I'd watch their films whenever I could. Now, this was probably in the late 50s. So there was no VCR or DVDs or anything like that. But my dad taught me how to hook up our reel-to-reel tape recorder, remember those, to the TV, and I would record the audio of their movies. And then I'd play them over and over and over again in my room. So that's how I started out. I joined the Jeanette MacDonald Club probably when I was about 17. It was the first club I heard of. And that was in 1961. And in 1962 was the anniversary of the Jeanette MacDonald Club. It was the 25th year. Was anybody else involved in that 3-day festival that we had that year at all here? No? Okay. I was lucky enough to be invited to go, and I brought some pictures, so I saved all my old photographs. So they're not in the best shape, but I wanted you to see what was going on at that time. It was a 3-day affair. The first day, we were invited to the Luau restaurant, paid for by Jeanette, for dinner and to meet her and to socialize. Would you like to introduce the check now?
I can do it after you're done talking.
You sure?
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, okay.
Or if you want to hold it up, you can do that too. Whatever.
Okay.
Belongs to Mary Lynn Graham.
Yeah. Okay. You can see it up closer later, but this is the official check that Jeanette wrote for the Luau restaurant to pay for the dinner. And from what I understand, she was very, very happy to do that. Katie was kind enough to have brought this, and she'll be giving you more details on how she acquired it. So we had dinner at the Luau. You can change it. And this is a picture of the head table with Jeanette and Jean, some of the people that were there at the affair. Jeanette was very cordial and very sweet and very friendly. She walked around the room. She talked to all of us. You can change it again. And she signed autographs, and I had taken a music book that I had that had her picture on it, and she was kind enough to sign that for me. No, that's not me. That's Peggy Cassidy. You'll see her picture in a couple of other pictures. Peggy and her mother lived not far from where I lived, and they were kind enough to allow me to go with them to the 3-day affair. So I'm very grateful for that. Okay. Again, socializing with everyone. And when I saw Jeanette for the first time, of course, I was totally awestruck. I was this little 18-year-old who hadn't had a lot of experience in life, and I was just like, I can't believe I'm seeing her and shaking her hand and saying hello. It was wonderful, and she was just so sweet. Okay. Oh, this is the Cassidy. Could you go back one, please? There's Peggy and her mom, Mrs. Cassidy. We're close friends. The Cassidy family were friends with Jeanette and Jean. And again, I was very honored to have met them. Okay. They presented Jeanette with a kind of an honorarium, and that's her holding it up. Okay. And Jean's helping her hold it up. And lastly, a group photo. And Blossom's there on the right. Okay, that was the first night at the Luau. The second day, we were invited to MGM Studios, and Jeanette invited us to come and see one of her films at the studio. Before we actually saw the film, this group shot was taken, and the photograph was reproduced, and she sent a copy of the photograph. You can kind of see her autograph on it to everybody who attended. I thought that was very sweet. And I'm up there right in back of Jeanette above her left shoulder. Okay, next. The third, if you wouldn't mind going back to MGM one more time. I have to tell you about the whole day at MGM. So we had the picture taken, then we went into the screening room, the professional screening room, and Jeanette went in with us. I can't remember if Jean was there, that he must have been there. And the first film they showed was the copy of This Is Your Life. And I wish I could remember Jeanette's reactions during that time, because knowing what I know now, that must have been quite touching for her to see that. She did leave towards the end of it and didn't stay for the film, the final film, but she did kind of hang out with us for a little while. Then they showed us Smiling Through, that we got to see. And lastly, we were invited to the commissary for lunch that was prearranged, and had lunch at the end of the day. Okay, thank you. The third day was we were invited to Jeanette's house. And of course, this is what the original house looked like. A lot of these pictures you've seen in all of the journals and all the photographs that we've seen. So it looks familiar to you. They're the twin gables. Okay, next. When you walk in the front door, To your left is the staircase leading upward, and that was for the bedrooms and the sitting rooms, et cetera, up there. Towards the right, there's some steps that go down into the living room. Okay, next. And to the left in the living room is the left side. And it's artfully decorated with antiques, and it was spotless. It was just beautiful. There's a large picture window at the opposite end of the room. And the lady that took us on this tour had said, we have frequent fires here in California, and it had been about the year before there was a fire in the Bel Air area. And it didn't come close to the house, but it was kind of scary to even be, involved with something like that. Okay, next. This is standing in front, looking towards the steps from the front door. Lots of photographs all around the house. This is the right side of the living room. And there's the big portrait that we're all familiar with. Kind of towards the left in the middle, there's a doorway, and that led into the formal dining room in the home. Okay, next, please. And this is the formal dining room with the same view through a window. It was beautiful, these beautiful trees. Those of you who have been up in Bel Air know how beautiful it is up there. Now there's another door that goes on the right side, and that led in to another area of the house. Next, please. And we'll see that in just a moment. I don't remember who it was that gave us the tour. I'm guessing it might have been the housekeeper. But, they didn't let us just run around and go wherever we wanted. They walked us through. So going upstairs, this is Jeanette's bedroom. The color was like a soft pink, peach color. It was very, very beautiful, very elegant. Again, a lot of photographs, artfully decorated. And what was interesting about the bed, because I don't know if you can tell, it looks like a king-size bed, but it was actually two twin beds pushed together, because you could see the break in the middle if you were up close. Okay, next. Again, the bedroom with a large mirror over the fireplace. And on the right, you see Jeanette's fans that she loves so much. So she had those there. Okay, next. Leaving the bedroom is like a sitting dressing area with a makeup table. Looks very comfortable, very elegant. And downstairs, there was a large rumpus room. You see this picture a lot in posed photographs. More masculine in nature. And then leading out of the club room is, of course, the pool area. You go downstairs to the pool area. They had a guest house at the end. And so we were allowed to go down there and walk around in the backyard. And it was a beautiful place to live, I can imagine. Okay. Jeanette had to leave because she had a doctor's appointment, but before she left, she posed for pictures. Whoever wanted to take pictures of her and Jean or separate, whatever they wanted. They took as much time as we needed, and then they left. This is a group shot of the group that went to the house tour, and there I am again, kneeling on the ground on the right. And again, it's a memory I've never forgotten. I probably lost a little of the details, but I've never forgotten it. I hold it very close to my heart as one of my best experiences. This is before they tore the house down, or after they tore the house down. This new gate was put up, and this is with the address. I just put that in there. I understand the ladies had quite a day yesterday. You must have wonderful stories of your road. I saw the pictures. It was a perfect day to go up there. So that's about it. Thank you. Gene appeared very much the gentleman. He was always around. He was friendly. I mean, if you talk to him, he wasn't real outgoing or anything. I mean, it was all about Gene, and he kind of stood to the sidelines. Yeah. Any others?
Did you see inside the guest house?
No, I didn't see inside the guest house. No. Again, thank you for your attention.
By the way, just as a quick aside on going back to the houses yesterday, for those of you who have seen, pictures of that driving tour that we do, the shocker of the day was to drive by the house we know as Mists, and the whole, the mailbox is there, but it's all being torn up. Paul Allen owns it. And I just started crying when I looked at it. I guess, did you post pictures?
Not of the wreckage that is missed. No.
The wreckage that is missed. Yeah, okay, we'll post some pictures. I plan to put something on the website because they've torn up the driveway. The mailbox with the address on it has, notices on it because of the construction. It's like, oh my God, I never cease to be amazed of how they just tear things down in this town that are landmarks. It's just inconceivable. But anyway, okay, so thank you, Sandy. That's great that you were there. How did Jeanette seem in terms of health and just her manner and everything?
Well, Jeanette, whenever she smiled, it was like the whole sun comes out.
Whenever she smiled, it was like the sun comes out, yeah.
Yeah. She seemed to be okay. I didn't know she had a heart condition at that time.
Right.
But she seemed pretty normal as far as I can tell.
I find it interesting that she walked out toward the end of This Is Your Life. I didn't know that. That's interesting to me. That's very interesting. Okay, so strangely enough, we have a little more information about that kind of fell into our hands. So I'm going to call Katie up to sort of continue on this theme.
So Jeanette really cared about her fans. She really loved them. She cared what they thought. She cared about the example that she set. It was important to her that their illusions remain intact, and so much so that she sacrificed a lot of personal happiness in that pursuit. But that's a different topic entirely. In a season of her life when her activities were becoming increasingly more limited, this big weekend in 1962 gave her something to plan and something to be excited about. And it was a sorely needed morale boost for her. Many of the members of her club had been with the club since its inception in 1937, so a celebration of the 25th anniversary was certainly called for. These were the people whose names Jeanette knew at stage doors from city to city. They met her trains, they waited for her in hotel lobbies, they brought her flowers and homemade snacks when she was on the road. The Golden Comets of the first 2 decades of the club, that's the club journal of the Jeanette MacDonald International Fan Club. The Golden Comets, particularly of the first 2 decades of the club when Marie Waddy Gerdes was president, were filled with anecdote after anecdote of members' brushes with their idol. These stories paint a now familiar picture of an exquisitely beautiful human being whose warmth and grace illuminated everything she touched. Ask pretty much anyone who ever met her, and that's what you get. The concert artist asking teenage girls how they're getting home after her concert. making sure they were safe in unfamiliar cities, meeting them for ice cream, wiring ahead to let them know when her train was getting in, to give them the chance to come and meet her. Knowing 4 or 5 of them had pooled their money to get one room in the same hotel where she was staying, and sending candy to their giggly slumber party. Inviting them to her Bel Air home when they had occasion to visit California, and greeting them in slacks, apologizing for having just washed her hair and covered it with a scarf. Entertaining them with a cold Coke and an audience with her dogs, and driving them back to town afterwards. This is Jeanette. This is consistently Jeanette. All warm friendliness with a ready smile and a quick bantering wit. Never too far gone into the stratosphere to be one of the girls, but too extraordinary to pass as a mere commoner. Her letter writing was the stuff of legend, and there were numerous people throughout her life with whom she kept up a regular correspondence. So in a sense, this gathering was like Old Home Week, and it afforded Jeanette not only the chance to participate in this give and take of genuine affection she felt for these people, but for the weekend she was back on her throne, a star getting to feel like a star, instead of a fairly young retiree looking her mortality full in the face. I have several things I want to share with you that pertain specifically to this occasion in 1962, after which I want to tell you a bit about how it is that these things came to be safe and in our hands today. I have a couple of letters that Jeanette wrote. The first was her annual, she wrote quarterly letters to the fan club to be published in their journal. And so the first one is addressed, Dear Clara and Members, April 9th, 1962. I am simply amazed at the beautiful edition of the 25th anniversary issue of the Golden Comet. I read it from cover to cover and then went back and read some of the articles over again. The hard work that has obviously gone into it will be, I hope, compensated for by my gratitude to you. I was genuinely touched. Naturally, I'm very proud of the personal letters. Frankly, I felt a couple of them went a little overboard in their accolades, but nevertheless, I appreciate the enthusiasm which prompted them, and I am not complaining. Incidentally, I saw Robert Leonard and his charming wife last Sunday, and they told me frankly that they did not quite know what to say because we didn't want to sound too mushy. Cute? I am eagerly looking forward to the celebration out here in June, and have been quite surprised and delighted at the number of members who are planning to come. I'm already figuring ahead for social activities for the group. As for the final date, inasmuch as Gene has to serve active duty for his Air Force work, the last 2 weeks in June poses a bit of a problem for us. We cannot have it until the very latter part of the month, so I would suggest it will fall sometime between June 25th and the 30th. The exact time of the big party we will have to set later, but at least it will give you who are attending some idea of how to plan. As for the 16th of June specifically, Gene has promised to fly in for that one day. That was their wedding anniversary. In any event, I hope you are looking forward to the celebration as eagerly as I am. I might add, I hope our weather will behave. But may I caution you to bring a warm coat for evenings in June in California. Okay, Jeanette. At this writing, we are making plans to fly back from Washington for the Easter holidays. It has all come about quite suddenly, so you can imagine the confusion in the household. Since it is primarily Air Force business for Gene, we will be house guests, and it will mean our social activities will be somewhat confined, but that suits me quite well. I love Washington in the cherry blossom season. Again, my sincere thanks to you all for your devotion and love, as ever, Jeanette. Then in May, she wrote Club President Clara Rhodes privately to discuss more details for the upcoming gathering. May 17th, 1962. Dear Clara, I am hastening to answer your very nice letter of May 13th, and I am delighted to know that plans are forging ahead for a June celebration, which I am naturally looking forward to. Of course, I'm flattered that the group want to give me a dinner. However, our own plans are confused, as Gene's tour of active duty with his Air Force Reserve starts on June 13th, and he will not return until June 22nd. Furthermore, we have very important social commitments which are impossible to change on the 24th, 25th, and 27th of June. I'm afraid in view of the pressure, I had better take June 26th and 28th off and really give myself a thorough rest. I would suggest that our party be Saturday, June 30th, just between you and me, that was the night I'd planned on giving the group a party. So you see, I do not wish to interfere with your plans, but I do indeed want to have a party for the group. I shall try to find a small, quiet restaurant that we can take over so that it will be completely private. As for the members coming and assembling and working out their own events, I recommend they do not come before June 25th, with an idea perhaps of staying through the early days of July. One more thing I am hoping I can arrange with Howard Strickling at MGM is for the group to visit the studio to see a motion picture being made or a television show, whichever happens to be in production at the time. Since you mentioned the members would like to see Smilin' Through, which does seem appropriate to the occasion and has been withheld from television showing, though I do not know why, I shall ask Mr. Strickling if there's any possibility of his securing a print that it may be shown in one of the projection rooms at the studio. Keep your fingers crossed. Yes, I agree. A visit to the Wax Museum would be in order. I have not seen it myself, but know it's en route to Disneyland. However, I would not recommend that the group try to do both events crowded into one day, as Disneyland itself is an enormous and exhausting trek. In fact, it is highly recommended that 2 days be required for a proper visit. Now, dear Clara, this is about it. Keep in touch with us, because I too am beginning to get quite a glow of anticipation. Just think how long it has been since I have met and seen many of the members. Emily joins me in best regards, as ever, Jeanette. Recently, some footage was found of the weekend itself. More about that in a moment, but first let's watch it. You'll see 2 different segments. The first is the club dinner at the Luau restaurant, and the second is the next day at Twin Gables. Many of you are familiar with the photos of Jeanette with and without the club members on this occasion, so the footage will seem really familiar to you. Winding up the Twin Gables footage are a few shots of the house and grounds. Watch especially for the orange roses in profusion. As we know, those were planted by Nelson Eddy. We had no idea that seeing these 8mm amateur clips would be possible in 2017. as if that wasn't cool enough, our friend Mary Lynn brought something else to show you from that weekend, which was, as Sandy said, the check that paid for the dinner at the luau. And if you'd like to see it up close, just talk to Mary Lynn afterwards. But it was for, $215.76. And I put it into an inflation calculator, actually, and in 2017 dollars, she dropped about $1,400 on that dinner in today's currency. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about how we got our hands on that footage and those letters and so many other exciting, wonderful, heartbreaking, fascinating things lately. By now, those of you who are on our Facebook groups or follow my blog know something about the JAM project, and as you know, at least roughly what it is. Thanks. But for those of you who haven't heard, I'll briefly bring you up to speed. The Reader's Digest version is that when Jeanette died in 1965, Clara Rhodes was the president of the fan club, a responsibility that she soon shared with her partner, Tessa Williams. Gene Raymond basically couldn't wait to get rid of Jeanette's stuff, so after culling a great many damning and important things, to be sure, he more or less made a giant parcel of the balance of the things and handed them over to Clara and Tessa. My opinion on that is the ever-manipulative Gene Raymond killed two birds with one stone. He cleaned out the apartment and he bought their loyalty and silence with the gift of his late wife's belongings and papers. Fast forward to 2010 when Clara dies. Tessa survives her, and they still have all this stuff. Boxes and boxes, filing cabinet after filing cabinet. Things that were in storage are now moved into the house that the two women shared, filling rooms to the extent that the house reportedly looked like an episode of Hoarders. Tessa's health and awareness started declining, and right around the beginning of 2015, the determination was made to begin liquidating her estate to cover the costs of her final illness. Many of us who have reached a certain level of enthusiasm about these people watch eBay like hawks, and we notice some very legitimate McDonald pieces being auctioned. An estate sale in that company in that part of Kansas stepped in to handle the processing of the things in the house, which included all of the Jeanette stuff. The people in charge were unfamiliar with Jeanette, but did some homework and realized that there was value here. They sold a few things to us outright, but most of it went on eBay, and the prices were scarily high. Our side did not win every battle, but I'm pleased to say we won most of the important ones, led by Dr. Maria Escano, our stalwart eBay warhorse, and Sharon, who galvanized our interested parties into a sort of system where we agreed not to bid against each other to try to lessen the financial impact of these things. However, the situation was not sustainable at that level of expense. Finally, as time went on, more than a year of it, the estate company got busy with other things, and some of the tension eased off a little bit. One day, I messaged one of the company owners, and we got into a conversation about some of the remaining pieces, and I began asking more questions and asking her if she'd do an outright sale for this or that, which became an inquiry about the entire remainder of the proceedings that they had. And she told me she would ask the family, and we went back and forth about this. And I quietly mentioned it to Angela Messino, and then to Mary Lynn Grana, and to Linda Tucker, all three of whom are in the room today, sitting right there. And there's nothing unusual in me mentioning this to them. These ladies are really good friends of mine, and we talk often and long-windedly. They all knew that what I may have lacked in financial ability to go with a major scale operation like this, I could make up for in masterminding the affair and providing storage space and the manpower to make some sense of it. Unanimously, these blessed friends urged me, find out how much. So I did, and it wasn't pretty. But it was staggering. But with these ladies, there's the wonderful bolstering feeling of deciding we're going to do something and then damn well doing it. Thus, the JAM project was born, highly classified and top secret. So we waited and we waited, and we got bad news. The other group, the Saints, the last dregs of the Jeanette MacDonald International Fan Club, well, they'd submitted an offer too. And it wasn't as much as ours, nor did it pay the estate company their commission, but the family wanted to go with that offer and take less money to keep us from getting it. The problem was they couldn't make good on their offer, and we could. Life is just phenomenal sometimes. They were given 2 weeks, then a month, then more than a month. They didn't have the money that they had offered. They couldn't get it. The family had bills to pay, so our offer was accepted with much gnashing of teeth. Everything that was left of Jeanette's estate and the JMIFC was put on a 30-foot trailer and shipped east. It was in November, but I made sure to have the Christmas tree up and decorated and the house spotless because I felt like we were liberating our girl, and childishly I wanted her new home to be a lot happier than her previous one had been. At long last, the trailer arrived, 6 filing cabinets filled to the brim, trunk after trunk of cans of film, and some 70 large moving boxes, heavy as lead and sealed with tape, were marshaled into my house. The next weeks, yes, weeks, were devoted to merely trying to open everything and glance through it once. Anything immediately vital was pulled out and set aside, and anything not climate sensitive was retaped, labeled, and moved to the attic. Storage bins bulged with photos waiting to be scanned. Boxes of records had to be sorted. We've started our preservation work on some of the film. And I've got 2 awesome pieces to share with you today. The JAM project is committed to getting these treasures digitized while they're still salvageable and making them available for everyone to enjoy free of charge. There's no point in hiding this stuff, in sitting on it or hoarding it. It needs to be seen and shared out of respect and love for the subject, and we all think that this is what Jeanette would want us to do. Nobody signed on for this wild ride to make money. Working with film, however, is an expensive process, so we're doing it piece by piece with the help of so many wonderful friends who have rallied around this cause with their wallets. The first piece we want to make sure that you all get to see is one that we didn't even know existed. It's a screen test that Jeanette made for NBC in 1955, and it's only about 2 minutes long. It's silent, but she is so lovely. It's just fun to watch. I can lip read most of what she's saying, talking to the guys off camera as they ask her to look a variety of ways, and I made a transcript of it that is available on my blog. There we go. That's perfect, yeah. Are you looking at me? Am I pretty? No. That's just my favorite part where she's like, am I pretty? Yes, you're pretty. She has a fabulous smile. She's 52 here. And her eyebrows, like she cannot control those eyebrows. They're very expressive. No, they're having her look a variety of directions, and she's saying, I can go here or here, and and they're trying to get her face from a lot of different angles before they do whatever project this was associated with. That's it. That's that. And then I with this last piece because it's really, really special. And I think a lot of you may have seen it, but we need to watch it together. Jeanette and Nelson singing a duet on live national television in the late 50s. There's been some discussion about whether this clip is from Lux Video Theater, which would make it Christmas of 56, or if it's from the big record, which would make it September of 57. The film and the film can were both labeled the big record. It's on the strip of film and it's on the can that it was in, so we had no choice but to call it what it was labeled, but it may have been labeled incorrectly because some of the stuff that you see in the footage sort of lends itself to it being Lux and not big record. Regardless, here they are and their ecstasy at being together, telling their story more beautifully and clearly than all of the talking that any of us can do. There are a couple of spots at the beginning where the sound is a bit warped. I promise Jeanette knows her notes. It goes, it's old, and it wasn't stored very well. But we're just so grateful to have this treasure, and we're way too excited about it to get picky. So just enjoy them enjoying each other.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Angela, and Mary Lynn, and Lynn Tucker. It's just so ironic that, after the story I tell you that happened 40 years ago, that this should come full circle. And people who were denying for years and years and years that they had any documentation or any proof of anything. One of the other items that when they were still auctions going on was this letter. Just wanted to say, the one written by Nelson on Christmas 1935, where, dearest Jeanette, I love you and will always be devoted to you. This letter that also people led by Maria pulled together to get this. So as Katie said, we didn't get everything, but we got a lot of it, and that they had all this documentation all these decades and lied about it was just, you can see the uphill battle that we had for many decades. Anyway, I wanted to say that the other day, again, as people it comes up in conversation that you don't know that somebody knew something. We were speaking to Leslie Edwards the other day, and all of a sudden she says, "Oh, well, I went to Jeanette's funeral. I was there, and outside in the crowd, and she saw a couple of things, and so she told us her story. So I said, would you be willing to tell it here? So I'd like to introduce Leslie, and some of you may know her, but again, we didn't know anything about this till, a couple days ago. So Leslie, please come up and tell your story.
I have to say, and I'll be very honest, and I think you were honest, I was honest the other day, but I really don't feel like I have a lot to say. It just kind of slipped out that we were talking, and I said I just mentioned how hard it was for me to ask my concert choir director to be excused that day, so that the next day or the next, whenever, so that I could go to her funeral. And he really gave me a lot of grief, but my mom let me go anyway. And I was really excited because we were going to Forest Lawn, and I'd never been to Forest Lawn. I knew a lot of old Hollywood, and the golden age of Hollywood was now residing there. And I had come to know Jeanette and Nelson only through their black and white. Well, we only had a black and white TV, and we were just, if you knew my dad, you'd know that just to say that we had a TV was really something. But that's when I was introduced to Jeanette MacDonald and Nelson Eddy. Was in junior high and high school. Living here in Southern California. And Mother had a lot to say about them, and she knew more than she would talk about, and she would always say, it's not my story to tell. And I really think I have to say really quickly that I learned to be circumspect and to let other people tell their own story because of my mother's example. And there's sort of a long and a short here, but the short of it is that my mother interfaced with a lot of people in the movie industry through her own gifts and talents. And although our family was a Navy family, and basically my parents really never got caught up in the industry that built the town. But anyhow, saying all of that, I'm the oldest of 6. I had 2 very young siblings at home who needed childcare if we were going to have this adventure. So Mom, and this is very uncharacteristic of her because she's not Miss Hollywood, just thought that it would be a nice experience for us to share together. And so she got childcare for little Kent and little Laura, and we got in our ice blue Volkswagen and drove up to Forest Lawn. And I remember that it was, and my memory is shaky, and because I'm 69, hello. And so, and hadn't thought about this for not years. I haven't thought about it for decades. So I don't want to say anything that I don't know is absolute fact. But I do remember going in through the gates and parking, and I remember having a difficult time parking, finding a place that was appropriate for the location. I don't know which chapel it was in, but I remember being struck by how small it was, thinking thinking there'd be thousands of people there because it was Jeanette MacDonald, And it was a very respectable crowd. Everybody was dressed appropriately, to my memory, for a funeral. It was almost as if everybody was going to go in to the chapel itself. And so it wasn't what we would see today with the men in the wife beaters and the shorts and the sandals. Everybody was dressed appropriately, but perhaps that's because of the time. And seeing some of the people as they came out. As I said, we were late, so seeing some of the people as they came out, and Mother could identify several. She immediately knew Lawrence Melchior, and she knew Lloyd Nolan, and I can remember those 2 names. And was Greer Garson there? Yeah. Okay, that was a big thrill for me and for my mother. But again, you have to know my mother. She's just very zen about all these things. But those are 3 names I remember. And I remember Mr. Raymond, who came out amongst the first. From where we were standing, it was far back, because Mom had heels on and no way was she walking in the grass. And then many people came out, and they kind of came out and away from the entrance, and then a lot of the men and a few women were kind of milling around the entrance, and then Mr. Eddy came out, Nelson Eddy came out, and what was so interesting to me, and it was remarkable. It was remarkable, was that people. Katie, come and be Nelson. Okay. So, Angela, it was your turn last time. So people would walk up and just kind of just take him like this, and then just embrace him as if he were the widower, which I thought was I didn't think about it so much then. I didn't think about it so much then because I thought, oh well, they made 8 movies together and they were good friends and yada yada yada, and I said, I must have said something to Mother because I remember a comment similar to, "There's more to the story," and that's it. And then they put the casket in the car, and many people were already leaving, and they put the casket in the hearse, and then we just stood quietly as everybody left and made our way back to the car. We did hear much of the funeral was piped, I guess we could say, outside, which was incredibly thoughtful. I mean, we had no idea that was going to happen. We just thought we'd go and just kind of see what we could make happen for ourselves,
Laughter, and then as music, as spontaneously as a... I'm sure that everyone here is very familiar with that wonderful play, Our Town, written by Thornton Wilder. And it seems to me that one scene of it has a great lesson for us. You remember the young married lady dies in childbirth, and she joins her mother who has gone before her. And they're seated off to one side of the stage together. And this is the place reserved for the eternal part of us. But over in another corner of the stage, that we shall always cherish. God bless you. We love you too.
So everybody was really respectful. Not too many people were talking amongst themselves. But I'm absolutely certain that Jeanette sang at least twice. I mean, that there was a recording of her singing, because the first time that she sang, we could hear the piano accompaniment. I think it was piano. It might have been more than that. And when her voice started, I wouldn't say it was a gasp, but I would say it was just an intake of breath amongst those of us who are outside, just like that. Do you know what I mean? But just to hear her voice, and it was a very tender moment. I mean, even me now, and I haven't thought about this for so long, but it was a sweet, tender moment to hear her voice again. So thank you. I don't want to take away from everything that's been said already, but that was just my little experience. And then I had an opportunity to hear him sing twice at the Anaheim Bowl, and just, Linda was asking me all kinds of questions. I mean, Sharon was asking me all kinds of questions, and I said, I was so focused on him that I can't remember anything else. Yes. I'm hard of hearing, so.
What about the
Well, he was inside during the funeral, and we were outside, because we were not amongst the invited.
everybody piled on at church?
He came out. He was amongst the first out, and he was a little off to the side. He was with people. He wasn't by himself.
Was he being congratulated as well?
Well, I would say probably not so much congratulated, although he might have felt that way. But as it was, yeah. Yes, of course, people were very, just behaved appropriately with him. I mean, he was the official widower, so. No, it's okay. I just wanted to have a little fun, and I didn't mean it to be your expense. I'm sorry. But my memory really is that's about it. I just can't even remember the other details, because when you're 16 and you've just really had a few years of just really admiring the music and the enjoyment that they brought to me anyway. My focus was from a 16-year-old perspective. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's stories like this, you never know what you're going to hear, what's going to come up. So, thank you. Thank you, Leslie. Yeah. People sometimes don't think their story is important, but every story is important, so thank you. All right. Does anyone have any questions at this time about anything? Okay, I think that we'll probably wrap it up then. And planning to meet in December. We should have the new magazine out soon, and we're just going to continue, and here's to another 40 years. How about that? And thank you all for joining us today and helping to celebrate.